Hey, babe, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about the news heard around the world about President Biden removing himself from reelection.
So, we are going to preface before we dive into this that this is not going to be focused on whatever political party you affiliate with. This is not the focus of this conversation.
I'm pretty sure if you listen to our podcast, we know what political party you probably affiliate
Yeah. And if you are listening and you are part of the other side that we do not necessarily agree with,
with.
you could still take tidbits from this because this is bipartisan in regards to information wise.
Yeah. I do want to say, I feel like we have all been speculating, is he going to step down? What would it mean? Who would be Kamala's running mate? Is it too late? I personally feel like it is too late. I mean, it is late. We are 4 months away from election, and there's a whole bunch of craziness happening. It's all polarizing, it's all insane. I know there's a ton of conspiracy theories floating around. I mean, Brandon, don't let him fool you guys. He is a very logical thinker, but he loves a rabbit hole and he loves a conspiracy.
I don't love conspiracy. I love a conspiracy supported by evidence.
Well, but you definitely have your theories about
Well, I also
things.
realize that the world works a certain way.
Yeah,
I would love the world to work one way, but I'm also of the reality that I know that it does not function that way.
right. So I think, with all of the news outlets covering the fact that many of the donors have pulled out from monetarily supporting Biden and what that means, and prominent people asking him to step down, and then him kind of doubling down and saying he's not going to. And now all of a sudden he did. That's a lot. But also, do we stand a chance in November? And what does this mean for like a vice president? And I mean, there's just so much. There's so much that people are scared of, that we're unsure of. We don't know what the future is going to look like. And so we wanted to put this episode out because we are a financial literacy podcast. And whether you want to believe it or not, money is political. Finances are political. Healthcare is political. Education is political, especially in the United States. Everything is backed by money, and money is backed by politics. And that, whether it's right or wrong, or whatever our opinions are about that, it is what it is. And so before people start panicking and moving money and thinking about the world ending, we thought it would be important to talk about some of the things that you can do and the things that you can control when it comes to your finances, regardless of who's in office or who takes office in November.
Yeah, to say it in plain English, your finances should not be 100% dependent upon who is in office. And if your plan is dependent upon who wins the election, you don't have a good plan. It's plain and
Mhm.
simple. Your plan should be able to function through whoever is in office. Okay.
What does that mean?
Well, what
Because
ends
I've never changed my plan based on who's in office. But what do people do when they make changes based on
well,
who's in office?
smart people who have a thorough understanding of how the economy functions and how their personal finances functions don't necessarily make a ton of changes based upon who's office because they have a much better understanding of how the economy as a whole function, and they realize that obviously there might be some minor fluctuations based upon people's emotions and people moving money based off of that as far as who is elected, but for long-term investing, that's not what moves the needle. Let's just
Okay.
think about it this way, as the United States economy, do you think that it would be smart to have it based off of just one individual who is voted on by people? And I'm going to put it out there. Majority of people don't have enough information and they don't care to find out enough information to make an actual intellectual decision on who should be president based upon their own personal needs. Because there are a lot of people out there that feel a certain way about certain topics and they're actually voting for someone who is 100% on the opposite side of addressing those issues.
Right.
So it's not smart to have economy based upon that one individual who is in office. Because let's be honest, the president also is really just a figurehead.
Right.
He really is. The way that, the world economy functions, you can't make decisions off of that.
So it's just like when anything else large happens in the world and people are starting to pull money out, moving money, closing accounts, start putting money under their mattresses. Like it's a long game, right? Especially when we're talking about investing. The market will fluctuate. There will be highs and lows, and the time is what will help even out your investments.
Yes. And this is purely focused on a financial aspect. I'm not talking about moral aspects and, equality, stuff of that nature. That's not what we're talking about in this episode. I think that's a completely different conversation. I'm simply talking about from a financial aspect, some of the things that you should focus on so that you can weather the storm regardless of whoever's in office.
Well, it looks like a storm is a coming in November, and I don't think there's enough umbrellas to shield us from it.
Well, first thing you need to focus on is what can you actually control?
I don't
And
know.
what I always boil back, what I always come back to, because I have these conversations with Jess. Don't worry about things you can't control.
It's very annoying to hear him say that often.
You could think about them, but continuously thinking about them for long periods of time is not the way that you should spend your energy. You need to focus on the things that you can control. So, for example, what is one of the main things that we always talk about that you can control? Your budget. How much money are you spending? What are you spending it on? You
Okay.
can control that. Regardless of who is in office, you have the ability to control what you're spending the money on. Now, obviously, there are fluctuations in inflation, which I'm not going to even say that has nothing to do with the president. I know you guys don't want to hear it, but that has nothing to do with the president. The president doesn't affect the inflation for the entire world. It doesn't work that way. But you can control your budget. Okay.
Okay.
You can also control your savings rate. How much are you actively saving, whether that's in an emergency fund or your 401k plan, an IRA, whatever it may be? You have control over that.
Okay.
All right.
That makes sense. That's fair.
You know, whether it's also just like, do you have some risk mitigation? Do you have life insurance? Do you have estate planning? What is the asset allocation in your investments? Are you as aggressive as you need to be? Or if you're an older individual, are you as conservative you might need to be? You can control those things. So those are the things that you should focus on and making sure that they are aligning properly with the goals that you are trying to achieve.
So, is there any event where you would recommend if somebody's investing and they're our age and we're still pretty aggressive? Hey, now there's a change in the presidency. Do we go more conservative for a period of time?
No.
Okay. You just made a blatant face.
Well, the thing is, like, so for example, most of the people that are investing in what's called a qualified plan. It is a plan that is meant for retirement and it has tax benefits to it. So, therefore, it has a much longer investment horizon before you'd be using the money. So, for example, if I'm 41 years old, let's just make it for even numbers that in my 401k plan, I'm not going to access it for another 20 years. Why would I make all these knee jerk reactions for 4 years for something I'm not going to touch for 20 years?
Okay.
All right.
Well, because people panic.
And that's the problem. People panic also because they don't have a plan.
Mm,
What is one of the key things to have in place so that you don't panic in any scenario? You have a plan.
mhm.
That's the purpose of a plan so that when S hits the fan or that negative scenario happens, you've already thought about what you would do in that scenario instead of trying to think about what you would do when you're already in it.
Yeah.
That is the purpose of a plan. And that is the number one thing that people don't have. They have no plan for what they want. They don't even have a plan for if nothing bad happens. They're just living day by day, going to work, putting money here, putting money there. But they haven't actually sat down and worked out a plan of, hey, I'm here today. I want to accomplish A, B, and C. What do I need to do that?
Okay.
All right.
All
And
right.
that also kind of leads into the whole second thing I was going to bring up. Avoid making knee jerk reactions. That is
I
the
feel like you've said 3 things already, but now we're on the second thing
That is
somehow.
the worst thing for anyone to do is to make a knee jerk reaction based upon some movement in, say, the market. So,
Mhm.
the one thing that I always hear people talk about is if you're old enough or if you've heard your parents, oh, in 2008, when the market crashed, my 401k plan went down and it was terrible and I don't trust investments anymore, blah, 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 blah. That was a knee jerk reaction. And what they failed to realize is that that was for a few months. And
And
then the
then
market
those
rebounded and you had record highs.
yeah.
So making a knee jerk reaction causes these people to miss out on, at that point in time, some of the highest gains they could have had.
Mm.
And it's all about having a plan. And most of these people ended up pulling money out of their investment. So it's still in the 401k plan, but they put it in cash instead of just leaving it in the investment. And
Mhm.
so when the investment went back up, they were sitting in cash. So they missed out on that going back up. And the thing is, these were people who weren't going to even touch this account for another 10 years. So there was no need to do that.
Yeah.
And it becomes from a place of fear and not having a plan.
I think too, you have clients who I know you've had to talk to when things have happened in the world. And the questions are, and I even know like our family members sometimes will text you and be like, should we move the money? And you're always like, no,
No,
no. And you are so unemotional about it, whereas they're so emotional. And granted, it is their money, but you're also working to make them more money, not lose money. But you are so just matter of fact when you're like, no, don't touch the money, leave it there. You're going to be fine. And people are like in panic mode in their heads, making it a thing when really they just need to stand the test of time.
people have recency bias. They think about the worst thing that just recently happened, but they don't look
Is
at
that
it
a
from.
term? Recency bias?
I think so.
I'm gonna have to look that up. I've never heard that in my life. Okay, sorry.
So people think about the bad thing that just recently happened. I said recently, by whatever. We'll look it up and
I feel
whatever.
like recency bias sounds better than
Yeah,
recently
yeah,
bias.
it's recency
I don't know that
bias.
either exists,
We'll
but we'll
find
find
out.
out.
But what ends up happening is that if you were to just step away and look at it from a historical context, because basically all the stuff you hear about market performance is all based upon historic performance. That's what they mainly use. So if you take a step back and you look at the trajectory of performance of the market over a longer period of time, it's up.
It's
It's
up
up.
and it's up and
Now,
it's up
obviously, in
and it's
short
up.
interims, you have drops, but if you look at it over the whole thing, it's up.
Yeah.
Now, if you zoom in, like I said, you see the little drops, but over the long period, which is what we're focused on, it's up. So you using just logic off of that, you should be fine. Now, obviously, if you're in retirement or going to be in retirement, then you have a little bit more worry. But if you have proper planning, you wouldn't have to worry either. So, for example,
Mm,
my mother is retired. I don't have any worries about what the market's doing for her because we've already set her retirement up where she has more than enough money to cover her regular daily living expenses. And it's guaranteed money that's going to come in regardless of what the market's doing until the day she dies.
mm,
Now, she is invested in the market with her other money, but that is not necessarily money that she needs to live on day to day. So even if that amount went to zero, she is still going to be able to live the life that she has right now.
yeah.
And that's where it comes in once again.
Having a
Planning.
plan. Yeah. No, that I mean that makes total sense, right? Like structuring everything so that your accounts can weather the storm.
Yeah. That's why,
Yeah.
like, when I hear, like, this isn't for most of us because we're millennials and we're still working, whatnot, but people that use the 4% rule. One of the issues I have with the 4% rule, which means that you are pulling, if you're in retirement, you're pulling out 4% of your investment portfolio each year to live off of. And you're hoping that you make that up in the market so that it's basically replenishing what you're pulling out. The issue with that is one, market performance, and then also if you need money within a 1 to 5 year time period, you're going to be using that money. It's already earmarked. It shouldn't be invested. So
Mm,
therefore, like most people, when they get into retirement using the 4% rule, they didn't pull out 2 or 3 years worth of income. They pulled out 1 year of income or waiting to see what the market does, and then they're waiting for the next year to pull out money. And so that's
yeah.
where you run into issues.
Well,
Now,
that's really big in like the fire movement, financial independence, retire early. So you have some people in their like 30s and 40s doing that and they're pulling out that 4%, which I know, like you just said, you have a pretty big issue with.
yeah, and that risk becomes exponentially larger when you. So, for example, if you're retiring at 60, average life expectancy is around 85. So that's 25 years. Now, add another 30 years to that, or another 20 years to that. That risk is exponentially higher now.
Right.
Now, also the thing that people, Jess and I always used to joke because I'm a math person, her not so much.
Not at all.
But there is something called sequence of returns when it comes to investing. All right. Now, what that means is that while you're contributing money into your 401k plan, like you have money in there and you're not pulling any of the money out, so it's all staying in the account. It does not matter the order of the annual returns. So you can have, 1 year where it's 10%, another year where it's 20%, another year where it's -1, and you can switch all those numbers up. Let's just say over a 20-year period of time. You can do whatever combination of those returns, and it's still mathematically going to come out the same. So
That
it
makes
does,
sense.
yeah. So it doesn't matter what that order is. Now, what ends up happening is though, once you reach the point of decumulation where you are starting to withdraw money from your 401k plan, that sequence of returns is extremely important because you are now pulling money out. So if you start to pull money out and you have early on, those first 1 to 5 years of you pulling money out, if you don't have the returns that you were expecting in the market and you have down years, that is drastically going to affect how much money you have and whether or not you have enough money through the rest of your life.
Because the
And they
the
don't
money
talk
that
about
you're
that
pulling
enough.
out is compounding and you're missing out on the compound interest?
Well, no, no, it's not that.
Oh.
You're not miss Once you start to pull money out. So like most of the ideal scenarios are like the market's up. So like, if I get 5% or 10%,
Mhm.
8% in the first few years of you withdrawing money, that works. But let's say the first year you draw it out, the market's down 5%.
Oh, I see.
Second year the market is down, you're down, say you're down 1%. People don't know mathematically. Now you have to basically double what you thought your return was going to be in order to even just get back to even of where you thought the end result was going to be with
Mhm.
that amount of money. Mathematically, it matters tremendously. This is why I'm a big proponent of having guaranteed money as part of your plan when you are quote unquote retiring, becoming work optional, whatever it may be.
Mhm. Well, and two, if you're doing the math, because I've done the math on the 4%, I mean, a lot of the people, especially in the fire movement, are living very frugally. Some of them have started moving overseas because cost of living is not as high, things like that. Because think about if you're taking 4% of a portfolio, but you want to be pulling out $100,000 a year, which most of them are not
No.
doing, right? You need a lot of money in order to do that. Like you need to have a ton of money already invested.
Yeah, I could do the quick math for you. Like, for example, let's just say if you're going to pull out $60,000 a year. All
Okay.
right. The kind of rule of thumb is that you need 25 times your income. And
Mhm.
that falls into the whole 4% rule. So at that amount, you would need 1.5 million.
Currently invested in order to pull out $60,000 a year.
Yeah, at 4%.
Right. And like, yes, you can live off of $60,000 a year and people do it and people do it with less, but that's not a life I want to live.
And that's $60,000. And you're not taking into account taxes
Right.
because most of the
So,
people are saving money and you might have some Roth here and there, but it's also a good portion of it pre tax.
yeah. So, like, you have to have a significant amount of retirement already available to you in order to even do that, unless you want to live in poverty, which in some cases, I guess these people are doing because they're just living so frugally.
Well, I mean, like I said, I mean, and also the thing is too is most of the times the avenues that you can use to accumulate that much money, you don't have access to all of that because, for example, like if you're looking to retire early, you can't put all your money into a 401k plan or an IRA because you have penalties associated with it. So a lot of that money is going to be saved in a brokerage account where you're being taxed each year on it.
Where else could you keep your money?
I mean, that's not really what this episode is about. So we're not going to
Okay.
get into the woods of that. But what I'm saying is that for most people, majority of their retirement savings is based upon their 401k plan, IRAs. And
Right.
if you're going to retire early, you have to have that as obviously part of the plan because you are going to need money when you're 60 years, 59 and a half years old
Yep.
or older. But you also need money, up until that point, and you need to have it in a place where you can access it.
Yeah. Without penalty.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. So no knee jerk reactions. What else would you advise?
Here's the one, man. Also, like it's. I think we kind of went over it. It's kind of plays in with the previous one as far as no knee jerk reaction, but analysis, a paralysis by analysis. Often people think about things way too much and way too deep, and it prevents them from doing anything. So, in all honesty, inaction is a decision. Most people think that they're not making a decision, but
Hmm.
inaction is a decision in and of itself. That means you're not doing something.
But aren't you kind of recommending that people don't do anything in these
I'm
situations?
talking about paralysis by analysis. So, therefore, you might analyze. So, there might be something that you
Analyze?
analyze. Analyze. You might need to make some type of change. but
Okay.
you've overanalyzed it now and you're not making any changes. I'm not saying don't make any changes. I said don't make knee jerk reactions.
Okay.
That's a difference.
Okay. If people are thinking, well, what kind of changes should I or could I potentially make in an administration change? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, honestly, probably the first one I would think of is maybe tax implications.
Okay.
So depending on how taxes, any changes they make to taxes, you might want to change your plan in regards to mitigating, the tax liability that you may have.
Mm,
That's the first one I could think of.
okay.
That's probably going
S-
to be the most,
So, like,
pertinent one.
somehow lowering your taxable income
Yeah, because the
if
idea,
taxes are being raised.
yeah, because we always talk about, it's not necessarily what you make; it's how much you get to keep.
Mm,
So you might need to reassess your plan. So, for example, like if you make a lot of money, you also need to reassess your estate planning. As far as what type of estate taxes might be involved if you have a large estate. You know,
right.
so there's things like that.
So,
But
what I'm hearing is we might need to be buying a G Wagon for your business to offset some tax implications.
no, we are not doing that. Do not put that on the radar of the IRS. We are not doing that. I am a virtual financial planning firm, and I have no really need for my car. So no IRS. We are not doing that. Don't come audit me.
Okay, fine.
But leading to the next one, and this is the big one, ignore the people on TV.
Mm. We watch so little TV because it is stressful and it makes my blood pressure go up and I just can't do it anymore. But
Because,
even like, scrolling, you're going to see it online and social media and then propaganda and all the things. It's just like you have to just tune out a little bit.
think about it this way: the number for most of those, like online outlets, whether it be people on social media or on TV themselves, talking about the market, finances in general, most of the time, their number one goal is not to educate.
Clickbait.
It's to
Clickbait, not educate.
yeah, it's to get views.
Right.
It's to get
So it's
people to
going to be
watch their shows.
polarizing, it's going to be
Yeah.
provocative, it's going to be dramatic. Like that is literally the goal of
So I
television.
mean, if you think about it, so like I can remember that we're still like kind of basically in the historic long bull run. And for the longest time, like for years, you have people saying, "Well, oh, this bull run can't go this further. It's gonna." And by bull run, I mean the market going up. And they're like, "This can't last. This can't last. It's going to go down. It's going to go down. The market has to go down." And this has been going on for years. For
Mhm.
years, people have been saying this, and it hasn't happened. I'm not saying that it can't happen, but what I'm trying to explain to you guys is that no one knows what the market's going to do. You
Right.
can like look at indicators, have a much better understanding of being able to see pattern signs and understand maybe where it could be moving. But no one actually knows what the market's going to do because if they did, they'd be the richest person in the world.
Yeah.
Very
And they
simple.
probably wouldn't be talking about it on
I wouldn't
television or
either.
social
If I knew
media.
exactly what the market was going to do, I would just sit back in my island, wherever,
Hut over the
because
water
I'd
in
be
Bora
rich enough to
Bora.
buy an island,
Yeah.
few islands, and just do what I do.
Yeah.
So
Sounds nice.
avoid all that noise. It's just noise.
Yeah.
Now, like you can learn something from these, but it's going to be on specific finance topics, not just the overall view of the economy. Because, like I said, for every view on this side, you can find just as many people that are on the opposite side that have a completely different view, but have the qualifications to quote unquote talk about it.
Mhm.
So you got to really, like I said, once again, all goes back to focusing on what you can control. You don't control the market, but you can control your long-term investing. You can control what you're invested in. You can control making sure that you're making your contributions each, pay period to your investments for the long term. Those are
Right.
the things you can control.
Good advice, babe.
And, once again, it comes back to making common sense changes. As we said before, if the market's down one day, don't, have a knee-jerk reaction and pull all your money out of your accounts. No,
Right.
don't do that. That's not a common sense change.
I mean, we look at our investment accounts, what, maybe once a month?
Yeah, I mean, because we're not.
Maybe.
Yeah, because we're long term investors. So my long term plan is not based on a year to year basis of what's going on in the market.
It is nice to see it going up when I have checked it recently, which is very nice. But again, it's like you check it, you make sure everything's okay, and then you log out. And, when I think of it, I'll log back in. But this is not something, I mean, some people are checking their stuff on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. Like that just sounds exhausting. Like you're stressing yourself out on
There's no reason to
purpose.
be checking your if you're in your 30s or 40s. There's no reason to be checking your 401k plan balance on a weekly basis. There's just not.
You heard it here first.
That is a long-term investing account. You shouldn't be making decisions based off of day-to-day fluctuations. Now, obviously, if you're starting to see patterns and changes over years, then yes, maybe you might need to make some changes, but you also probably need to speak to a professional about it.
Right.
But you don't need to be making these knee-jerk reactions. You need to make common sense changes when it comes to these things. And common sense changes often take time for you to take a step back and think about it from a logical standpoint, not an emotional.
Planning, logical standpoints.
And also, at the end of the day, just be flexible within reason.
What does that mean?
So, we always talk about having a plan. And I always advocate that having a plan is great, but it's the act of planning that is more important. Because if you have a
Mm,
plan and you're not implementing it, it doesn't matter. So the active implementation of it is planning. Now,
mm,
also, it's also constantly reviewing your plan to making sure that it still aligns with your goals and is still working towards achieving those. So, for example, even just changing within being flexible within reason could be your goal changed.
right.
So you could have had a goal 2 years ago that now that you think about it, that goal is no longer something that you're looking to achieve. So therefore, you need to reassess what your goal is. And once you have a clear definition of what that is, you need to make some changes to your plans because more than likely there are going to be changes that need to be made in order for you to focus on that new goal.
Right. But that should happen regardless of a
Oh
change
yeah.
in the presidential
Oh,
office.
100%. You should always be focusing on reevaluating your plan. And like I said, reevaluating it to make sure that one, it's working towards the goal that you had talked about, but then also making sure that have there been any changes in your life that need to be accounted for when it comes to the plan itself?
Right.
Because I could think of things where a year or two ago were a goal, and now they're not a goal anymore. I'm like, that's no longer important to me. So you need to
Mm,
make changes for that.
right. Yeah, so that constant like introspection, assessing, thinking about family changes, were you single and now you're married? Now you're married with children. You had one child, now you have two. I mean, all of those things matter for sure.
And also just kind of taking a step back from the finance aspect, we're inundated with so much information now. Think back to, even just think back to like Obama period, where we had social media, but it wasn't to the extent that it is now. Like we weren't tied to it. Like Instagram didn't exist at that time.
Right.
We weren't seeing it.
It's an easier time.
Yeah, Twitter was around, but you didn't see it the way that we do now. We're just basically attached to it. We see it all the time. So I don't think so. Now, granted, like, some things are different, but I don't think that the world has drastically changed in regards to the dangers or negative things that are occurring. I think we're just now inundated with it so much that it seems like there's so much more. When in reality, the world's probably always been like this. It's just that our technology and news it wasn't able to keep up with it, so we didn't see it all.
Yeah. You do say that a lot, and I do think about that quite a bit because I do think you're accurate, but it's hard to think about it like that because it is in our faces at all times at this stage, and it
Yeah,
wasn't before. But
and
things
this,
were still happening, we just didn't know about it at the speed of light.
yeah, and also I would say like like I'm not to dismiss any certain things that are occurring now that could have long term lasting effects negatively on groups of people. Not to discount those because those are things that we do need to focus on, but I'm a person who I love history. It's one of my favorite subject matters. And I think, unfortunately, most people don't focus on it enough because history shows you a lot. It shows you a lot and it can really help you dictate where things are and also give you really perspective on where you are at currently. I love history so much that I realize people have always sucked. Like the
Mm,
human race is not a good species. They've always done terrible things. And if you look at history, it shows you how bad we can be. So you have to have kind of some perspective of that. Like, just simply thinking about there was a time period in Europe where people would take their kids and have lunches and gather to watch a beheading.
yeah, that's wild.
Like this was the entertainment of the day to have with your family to watch someone be beheaded.
That's crazy. And I wasn't even allowed to watch The Simpsons growing up, but here we are.
And also, fun fact, I think the last beheading in Europe happened in like the 60s or 70s.
Oh,
So it
wow.
was like something like before the guillotine was actually like completely outlawed, it was in modern time.
That is insanity.
So
Yeah.
like kind of having that
But it wasn't on
perspective,
social
yeah,
media.
having that perspective kind of helps me personally. But it's not to say that we don't need to address certain things so that we don't go back.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
it's like,
history is absolutely
yes.
about to repeat
So
itself.
it's recognize signs that we've seen in the past and address those signs and don't dismiss them like we did in the past so that
We
we don't
can
have
be
the same things
better.
occur again.
Know better, do better.
Yes. But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, you should be in control of your finances. You shouldn't have your finances be controlling you based upon who is in office.
All right. So, no knee jerk reactions, make a plan, reassess your goals. Don't watch too much TV or social media and let that influence you. And be flexible when you're thinking about what changes might need to be made. But again, don't let those changes happen because there is a change in
Yeah,
office.
and it's also knowing yourself. It's knowing
Know
yourself.
yourself.
And if you need help with that, it's acknowledging that you need help and getting help. I always joke and say sometimes I'm the wall between my clients and doing something stupid.
Yeah, you do say that a lot. And I do think you have clients too who are very smart people, but they are also emotional people and they would be tempted to make those knee jerk
Yep.
reactions if they didn't have you to bring them back down to earth to say, "Nope, we're not touching anything."
Yep. And I take those calls and I walk them right back off the ledge. And I know what's going to happen. And but I said, like, that person knows who they are.
That alone covers your fee, right? Like making sure that they're not losing money by making those kinds of
I would say
decisions.
so.
Yeah, I think that's good. Well, we leave you with anything, money is political, please go and vote. Regardless of what side you're on, votes do matter.
Yeah. I don't want to hear people complain that don't vote.
Yeah, that's not an option. And
And I'm going to say this too. If you're black and you don't vote, I don't want to hear from you either. Just simply stating that our people fought, died for the right. So if you're a black person and you like, I'm just not going to vote this time, I don't want to
that's
hear from
not
you.
an
You're
answer.
not my
That's
people
not
at
a
all.
solution. Ooh, all right. Well, we're going to end on a spicy note apparently today.
I was feeling that one. Sorry.
That's fine. It's our podcast. You can say what you want. Well, go vote. Please show up at the polls, and hopefully, this episode is helpful to you in not making knee jerk reactions and remembering that investing is a long term play. Until next time.